you are aware of this. Oh, so welcome to Drupal for Everyone. First, let me show you a little clip because I don't know if you have seen a little bit of this, which was like Drupal rebrand initiative and the Promote Drupal initiative that has been making waves on making Drupal easier for marketing teams, for not only developers, but also other people in the ecosystem like site builders. So I actually use their template because now they have a PowerPoint template and a couple of other things. So the template that you're looking at is something that you can get out of the box from the Promote Drupal initiative. Okay, so who am I? My name is Bernardo Martinez. I'm a senior front-end developer at Voltis. We are a cybersecurity company that primarily works in the government space, and I'm work for the digital services division. So we handle a couple of contracts, one with SBA, which I'm placed on, and a couple of other agencies. So who is this session for, you might be wondering? This session is for anyone who might be curious about Drupal. Whether you are a site builder, a hobbyist, a techno geek, anything in between, a student, a faculty member. Back in the day when I started with Drupal, there were many things that led me to go towards WordPress or something else, one of which was the lack of site templates. So what is a site template? A site template is a combination of a recipe, single directory components, and default content. It can include more than that, but those three are key. Why? Because recipes lets you add configuration in a repeatable manner. So if you need to have something configure a content type or a type of page structuring a certain way, you will have it out of the box. SDCs lets you share how they're gonna look like, and default content gives you something to play with. Because if you have recipes on SDC, but you don't have default content, you have to go through all the variations of a site, and that takes a lot of time. As a student worker, when I was an undergrad and as a grad student, I struggle a little bit with that because sometimes I will have a faculty member come to me and ask me, hey, can you put a website together for me? And I will go and try out whether that was Drupal or WordPress or something else and try and see what I could put up together that looked good enough to meet the needs that they had and for me to learn something out of that. So what Drupal is helping to do with site templates and the marketplace is bring all those people back in, whether that is a student, a faculty member, or others. Now, Drupal might not be for everything yet, and it might not be for everything. And that is only because we're missing the marketplace. Once the marketplace is in place, it could be for everything that tries to transition from a small version of a thing, whether that's an app or a site, into a full-blown CMS. If your end goal is to become a fully featured CMS, Drupal could be everything and anything for you and for everyone. If you were at DrupalCon Atlanta, you probably saw Dries talk about Legos and how Legos are building blocks and how he considers Drupal to be a Lego builder. Now, Legos is something I can relate to a degree, but to me, Drupal is more like a multi-tool. Why? I took the Victorinox Swiss Army knife as an example, because Drupal can be many things. You can start with a fully loaded Swiss Army knife that has everything possible. Or you could start just with the blade, or the blade and the can opener. You can make it whichever one you like. And that is the beautiful thing about having a system that's flexible and extendable. Now, right now, because we don't have site templates and the marketplace is not built up yet, you kind of have to do that a lot on your own. But once those come in, that's gonna simplify it so you can have an everyday carry version of Drupal, a pocket one, and one that you can leave in your car, one that you can take camping, all the tools that you need at your disposal. Now, there's multiple types of multi-tools. You have the Swiss Army knife, but you also have um, the Leatherman that emphasizes pliers instead of a blade. The difference in multi-tools just tells a little bit about the different uses that we can have, whether that's here in the web. And the reason why I couldn't relate to Legos as much is because Legos can have different themes, whether it's a Star Wars Lego or it's a Star Trek Lego or a Batman Lego. But once you finish it and you put it in the shelf, it's done. I don't know that I personally, if I ever put a Lego together, I don't really play with it anymore. But a multi-tool, you might use it every now and then. You might use it every day. And sometimes you have to swap parts because you might only use the blade of the multi-tool and that blade might wear out and then you replace it, but then you still have the other tools that are within it. And then as soon as you replace it, you can have you can reuse it and repurpose it for something else. Now, what about other tools? I don't think Drupal is gonna replace what other tools can provide for you. If you're looking for something simple that doesn't become into a CMS and is more of a web application, you have things like Laravel. You have all the power of PHP, but you don't have to worry about some of the concerns that are CMS specific. If you're trying to set up a site and you don't necessarily, it's more of a marketing page, you don't necessarily need CMS capabilities, you have something like Astro. Or you have other tools that provide you some of that flexibility, such as WordPress and Backdrop. And with that, I want to give Backdrop some kudos because they made significant progress themselves and to the Drupal ecosystem to make sure that we could come back to site templates and make ourselves better for everyone. So Drupal grows as your CMS needs grow. That's key of this presentation, and that's something that I want you to think about. Because whatever type of site or application you're setting up yourself to do, Drupal might be a little bit of an overkill at the beginning, but if your end goal is to end up as a CMS that's flexible, that can integrate with other stuff, and you can see it growing into the future, you might be setting yourself up for success if you start with Drupal, because if you might be only using the blade, but you could add parts to it as you need them. So, over the last 5 years or so, Drupal has improved the out-of-the-box experience. And you may have seen this if you've been in the Drupal community, but if you didn't know, it used to be harder to theme, it used to be harder to do a couple of other things. And that has been coming down and has been simplified to allow new users into the community and to make sure that we take into account the needs not only of a certain type of developer, whether that's backend or frontend, but also the site builder. So let's start with some demos, because I don't know how many of you are aware of this. If you go to Drupal.org and then you go to the download page, you can download Drupal CMS and you can download Drupal core. But if you scroll down, you can also download a standalone version of Drupal. If you haven't played with it, download it because it's powerful. You can get it for Mac, for Windows, and even for Linux nowadays. And if that doesn't work, feel free to provide some feedback on Drupal Slack because they are working on trying to get it and make it easier. Now, how does that look? If you open that up, it takes a second, but after some time, you will get a window like this that gives you a local port and a link to go to the page. And then you have a full PHP application running locally without the need for you to know Docker, without the need for you to set up a local environment. Now, if you're a developer, I will say maybe try to get it set up with DDEP because that will give you more out-of-the-box capabilities. But if you're only poking around and trying to see what Drupal is good for and what it's out there for you and what you can do, you can play with a lot of the tools and things that we're gonna see here out of the box by just installing this. And then you could skip all these steps or just add something, but name it something. Give it a username and a password. It takes a minute to install all the different modules and some of the templates, because if you haven't heard of Drupal CMS, it's a pre-configured version of Drupal that comes packaged and bundled with a lot of goodies out for you. And then once it's done, it's gonna log you in and it's gonna have everything there for you. Now, if you want it, what happens once you install it, if you wanted to reset this, because you might want to play with it and then you're like, oh, I don't want the stuff anymore. For a little while, I didn't know how that actually worked. But I found out the other day, is just on your documents inside of Mac, there's a Drupal folder. If you delete this, it will reset this thing and then it will pull a new version of Drupal CMS and restore everything. Now that's stored on SQLite, so it's just stored on your machine. So this is more of a sandbox environment for you to play with and throw away. Not necessarily something for you to keep, but something for you to mess around with the latest and greatest that Drupal is putting out there on Drupal CMS. And just like that, you have a site built that has a lot of different configuration and stuff, and then you can go to extend and you can add different things that are in there, such as recipes for accessibility, for case studies, for a blog, if you wanted to have one blog, for events, for news, and the recipes configure everything. If you know Drupal, you can go into content and see some basic content, but you can also define content types, which are basically page types. But the recipe already defines different page types for you, and if you run it, you have something here for news, and you have something here for anything else. Now that's great, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's good to know. Maybe I haven't played with that, maybe I should. But there is more. That's actually just the beginning, and that's not necessarily what I would call a site template yet. That's just for you to get your hands dirty with Drupal and see what it can do for you. We also have Drupal Forge. Now, Drupal Forge is a project that I was presenting in Florida, and I knew a little bit about it, but it's community run and they host some site templates for people to play with. Now, when I went to Florida, I noticed that Mike Herschel, who is a CSS core committer, makes the Florida DrupalCon website free for you to download, clone, and do anything that you want to do. Now, if you were to download and run this site in Drupal, the way that Drupal used to be structured is that you will get the repo and you will download the information. And here you can see I just clone his repo because he makes it free. And this is my version of that. And then you will stand it up. And then once you did a site install, which basically be you clone it, and then you do a ddeb brush si -- existing config, then you will end up with this. And then you're like, huh, that doesn't look quite the same as this. Somebody pulled my leg. Because, I was expecting to see some images, maybe not pages, because that'd be content, right? But you expected to see more than that. Well, that just so happens that that was the case before recipes. And not necessarily SDC, but before recipes. And that's a little bit of a problem. Because when I tried to get started in Drupal, that was a little bit of a barrier. I couldn't fathom myself coming up with a theme from scratch. That's just too intensive and too time consuming. Whereas if you can get started and get on and going with something better, then your time and energy can go into just getting the content and getting the right images. So what happens if I apply a recipe now? let's do that because I made a recipe for that and then I gave it to the folks at Drupal Forge so anybody can do this now. So the recipe is applied. So I'm gonna do drush cr, which is a command to clear the cache, and a drush ULI, so it will give me a one-time login token. And then I'm inside the website. But if you notice, this time around, if I go back to the main page, all the content is here. Isn't this way better as a experience for you when you're trying to demo something and try a site? I think so. Because now if I went to content, um, hmm, hmm, hmm. if I went to content, then I could reverse engineer anything that he has in here. And let me tell you, I mean, as a student working on why not, if they tell me swap the images and swap the text, I will swap the image and swap the text. I might forget to move something around and something might still be legacy or might still say Florida or something. But it's easier for you to do that. And I feel that's something that Joomla and WordPress did better for a long time. And even maybe some other systems like Astro by providing templates on a marketplace. And that has set us behind. Now, Drupal is definitely powerful because he has made it out this long without it. Isn't that crazy? That you would think that by now this would have been something that everybody would have put a lot of energy into, but they haven't. But now, like, there's another example that you can take a look as well, like Drupal for Gov. This one I also put in to Drupal Forge. So if you go to drupalforge.org, as I'm presenting, you can go down and then you can see the Florida one, the Midcam one, and the Drupal for Gov. And those three are site templates. If you click launch, you wait for a second, then you just pass the little gotcha thing, and it spins up a site for you, a site that has some default content, and then you click on that link and boom, that's a Drupal site for you to play with a login link and a password and everything for you to see behind the scenes. Because, you know, it's easy for me to show you and tell you what it is, but then you're going to go home and tell me, oh, well, now I have to get as far as he got. But if you can do that right now, then, you know, what's keeping you away from being able to do that for any other need? So now you have a full website that has a lot of the same content I was showing you, and it's up to you to play with and change information as you need to. And then you can download the database or anything else that you need to do and host it wherever you like, on your own server or somewhere else. Let me go back to the slides. So our current experience is not the greatest. We probably could do better. Drupal is definitely powerful, but it hasn't never. I feel like we missed out a little bit on emphasizing that the end user experience. But our time has come. So as we saw, you can find many repos out there on the internet that are open that include a Drupal theme. There's a couple of government sites that include a Drupal theme that are open source. And then you can clone them. Now, if you don't have data for them, they kind of look like the Florida one because then the theme is missing a lot of parts. But it is easier at least to get started when it comes to that. Now, if you can have more site templates, that's going to increase adoption and it's going to make it easier for anybody to use. The one thing if you want to make your own site template is make sure that whatever project you're looking at, whatever Drupal project, is using the minimal profile. Because Drupal recipes has a little bit of an issue if you're trying to do it with the standard profile and there's a little bit of a bug. So if you know what that is, then that's a little bit of food for thought for you. If you don't worry about it. And then if you start with an empty site, you're making assumptions about what things actually work on their website and what things they actually use. But if you already have some content, you know they're using it because, you know, that's kind of how you got it in the demo. So these are the steps that I took to get that up and running. You clone the repo. I added Mike's repo, which is the original one, although that one doesn't have the recipe for that one. You had to go to my fork, but you can probably find it from there. And then you type in SI, which is site install, existing config, which install it from within the config folder of that Drupal site. And then you log in. And that will get you as far as having this, an empty template. But if you have the recipe, you apply the recipe with the default content, and then you will get here. So what makes a site template? I told you a little bit about that. There's this thing called SDC, there's this thing called recipes, but let's digest that a little bit. So Drupal recipes and project browser, which is the UI that lets you see them. The project browser started about 5 years ago, I think, and it has had its challenges because they had to go back into the community and clean up a lot of the projects to add images, add text, add descriptions. Now, Drupal recipes has only been in Drupal core for about a year. So that's something to keep in mind because a lot of Drupal developers haven't dealt with Drupal recipes just because it's that new. But it's going to be so powerful and impactful that if you're a developer or you're a site builder or you know a developer that works in your team, I will encourage you to get them into Drupal recipes and become familiar with that API because that's the future. And when the marketplace lands, everybody should be able to manage that a little better. Now, Drupal single directory components. Very similar to recipes, only landed last year. I mean, it was stable in March of 2024. So two big major APIs that make site templates have only been available for development in production for about a year. But they are already making waves and significant improvements. Default content. Default content has been around for longer. The original module was created in October of 2015. But I don't think that module was compatible with SDC. I think that was just an experimental thing. So I will imagine this was updated maybe about 2-3 years ago to make it fully compatible with the schema that Drupal required. A mother theme. So I talk about the marketplace. Dries posted this image on his blog, and I added a link down here towards the bottom. Wouldn't it be great if you could go to a marketplace and either find a free theme or pay them anywhere from, 100, 200 to $1,000 and get a site template that helps you for your hospital or for a news channel or for a charity or for a gallery, or at least gets you 90% there. Because right now the problem is theming in Drupal is hard. It's hard. It's hard because there are no examples, and the examples are kind of incomplete because you kind of have to put them together on your own. But once you have a site template, you have every single piece of the stack, and that will make it easy for you to digest. But before that comes in, which maybe comes in towards the end of this year or early next year, you have all these free templates that you can take a stab at and try to see how they are working. And a lot of these are actually becoming site templates or are Drupal core themes, and they are out there and available. So I encourage you to explore them as you play around with Drupal. Automatic updates. That's something else that's relatively new, and this will make a significant difference when you're trying to set up a website for a faculty member, a family, or a friend. Because I brought this up at a Drupal meeting that they had about the marketplace. Drupal developers used to make a lot of websites for family and friends because we know the power of the tool. The tool is powerful. The problem is updating the tool requires you to constantly be doing maintenance for free. That's not necessarily something everybody wants to do. And not even in the WordPress community. And I know they get hacked a lot, and I'm sure Drupal gets some of that too, because the websites are not maintained. But having automatic updates, at least for core things, is going to help us lower that barrier and make it easy for people to be encouraged, along with site templates, to do more stuff for family and friends and maybe lower budget projects that are just fun. So what does this lead to? It leads to happy end users, happy hobbyists, relatives, and friends. So I wanted to add a little bit of a demo on an SDC and a recipe in case you haven't seen it and just show you a TLDR on how they compare. So Drupal recipes, I already show you kind of like the timeline and the fact that they came in last year and in Drupal 10.3. So if you're not in Drupal 10.3, you are missing out. Update Drupal 10.3. But what is the TLDR? To create a recipe, you make a recipe folder, you add a recipe.yaml, and this is where the magic happens. Then you copy the core config that you need. You can copy the config from the config export folder. If you know what I'm talking about, it's basically when you add a field in Drupal, if you do a Drush CSD, there is some configuration that goes along with it, and then you export it, and it goes into a default folder in Drupal if you're a developer. But you can copy those and put them into the folder here, and then just reference those inside of the recipe folder, and then that's it. Similar with content, except for you need to install the default content module. And this is kind of how it will look a little bit. So you have a recipes folder inside a web. In this case, I was doing a paragraph button because I wanted to have some configuration. I copied the configuration over. Some of the configuration, you don't need to have it here because you can have it as a config action inside of the recipe.yaml. But you don't want to redo everything because who wants to redo every configuration YAML field that Drupal does? You only usually do the car entity form display and the view display because that's kind of like how you said if you had like a link, the length of the link, and a couple of other things. Make sure you remove the UUIDs because you don't really need those when you're doing a recipe. Drupal will assign new ones. So this is how that looks. So if you are looking at the recipe.yaml, you have a config action, and this is an example, but this example actually works. It's of something that I was working on last week. So you import the configuration for the stuff that you want to have strict. If you just leave stuff in the config folder, it'll be imported. But if there is already configuration that on the Drupal side that doesn't match, then you would just keep it. If you want to force that configuration in, you just set it as strict, and then it will throw you an error if that overrides something or if it doesn't fit. And then down here, you can change some things like I changed the trim length to 120 instead of 80 characters. So Drupal single directory components. Oh, I was double checking on time because I thought, oh, maybe I am going to run out. So what is the TLDR on single directory components? You add a directory name, whatever you want to call it. Then you have a component.yaml file. And then you have your twig and your CSS files. And that sounds great. It sounds pretty easy at the beginning because if you ever done any type of component in Drupal with Pattern Lab or Storybook, it's very similar to that. Except for now you have to deal with this file. This file has been the reason why it took me long to adopt SCC because the YAML file has extra notation and stuff that you are like, oh, I never had to deal with that before in front end. Like, what the heck is this field like? What type is it? So I found out that you can find that out easily if you are doing recipes while you're doing SDC, because recipes will tell you what the type of it is, and then you just copy it over. The only thing to keep in mind is that you also want to define null as a type. The reason why you want to define null as a type is because in Drupal, if you have a string, but it's not a required field, and they don't set anything, it will send you a null. And if you don't tell SDC that there's a possibility that null might be coming, it will throw you an error and probably blow that page out. You know, little things that you learn. So for nearly anything, I added a null. Even though Boolean only has true or false, you could have a scenario where somebody passed something and it wasn't a Boolean. So just for safety, just add null. So type, it says type, but you can have an array of types. And that's it. I don't know if there's any questions. I also added at the bottom kind of like some of the channels that are good for like getting these slides, learning more about Drupal, and learning more about site templates.
Cool. That's awesome. I'm really excited for all these new things. This is gonna make life very easy for a lot of people. Does anybody have any questions? You can put them in the chat or um, go ahead and ask. Yeah.
If you're coming to a meet camp in Chicago, which is, I guess I will do a little plug to have a little bit of time,
Yeah,
which is
sure.
2 3 weeks. I'll be doing a training on theming called Franken Theme, and it's basically covering over SDCs, recipes, and a little bit extra. Like some of those themes that I told you that are already site templates, like Drupal Commerce and why not. I'm just gonna tell you like the things that I think that are cool about that we use on SBA.gov and that I use for other things, and how they can make your life easier as a themer. So that's a little more of a developer training. I think it's on Tuesday afternoon, but that's something to keep in mind. That's coming over. And we have a DrupalCon Chattanooga in November. So if you guys want to come all the way over to Tennessee, you're welcome to check it out.
I'm gonna put the training there in the chat. Snag it. All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, I'm gonna stop the recording now.